The bird feeder hung from a thin metal hook just outside the kitchen window, close enough that someone washing dishes could watch it without trying. It was the kind sold everywhere: clear plastic tube, small ports with short perches, a clip at the top meant to keep the lid shut against wind and clumsy birds. Inside were sunflower seeds, black-striped, glossy, filling the tube almost to the top. The birds came early: chickadees first, quick and precise, finches later, louder, less patient. A pair of sparrows tried to muscle in, flapping and scolding. The feeder swayed gently under their weight, seeds rattling softly inside. For weeks, nothing else bothered it. Then the squirrel appeared. He came from the maple tree that shaded the fence line, dropping down branch by branch until he reached the railing. He was small, lean, still carrying the sharp energy of late summer. His tail flicked constantly, a restless punctuation mark behind him. He sat on the railing and stared at the feeder for a long time without moving. This wasn't hunger. Not yet. It was assessment. The feeder was too far to jump directly. The hook was thin. The clip was metal, spring-loaded, shiny where fingers had touched it before. The squirrel cocked his head, nose twitching, eyes following the movement of birds as they landed and left. He made no attempt that first day. He left the way he came, as if the feeder were just another detail to be filed away. The next morning he returned earlier. The birds scattered when they saw him, wings flashing in short bursts of panic. The feeder swung freely now, unoccupied. The squirrel climbed down the railing, stretched his body as long as it would go, and reached for the pole that held the hook. He missed. He landed awkwardly, claws scraping, then righted himself and tried again. This time he caught the pole with one paw, hanging briefly before dropping back down. He froze, listening, checking for danger. Nothing happened. Inside the house, the person at the window noticed the movement and smiled, already predicting failure. Squirrels tried feeders all the time. They fell. They gave up. The clip usually won. The squirrel sat back on his haunches and stared up again. He did not try the same move twice. Instead, he climbed higher on the railing, shifted his angle, and jumped for the hook itself. He brushed it with his fingertips, just enough to feel it swing, then fell back, landing cleanly this time. The feeder rocked, seeds clicking inside like dry rain. The squirrel's ears twitched. He climbed back up and jumped again, this time grabbing the hook solidly. His weight pulled the feeder down sharply. The birds did not return. The squirrel hung there, body stretched, hind feet searching for purchase that didn't exist. He swung once, twice, then dropped deliberately, not losing balance, not panicking. On the ground, he stood still, watching the feeder settle. Something had changed. That afternoon, the squirrel returned with a new focus. He didn't look at the seeds through the plastic. He looked only at the top, at the lid, at the clip. He climbed the pole this time, not the railing. It was harder, smoother, but closer. Halfway up, he paused, hugging the metal with his body, claws biting just enough to hold. He listened again. Wind. Distant traffic. Nothing else. He climbed the rest of the way and reached the feeder. Up close, the clip was different than it looked from the ground. It pressed inward with tension. It was meant to be pinched, not pulled. Birds never touched it. Humans did, but humans had hands shaped for that kind of thing. The squirrel reached out with one paw and tapped it lightly. Nothing. He tapped it again, harder. The feeder swung, bumping his chest. He grabbed the tube with both front paws, clung to it, and wrapped his hind legs around it awkwardly. The plastic was slick. The feeder spun slowly. The squirrel adjusted, hugging tighter, tail flicking for balance. He pressed the clip with one paw. The lid didn't open. He released it and repositioned his paw, pressing from a slightly different angle. The clip flexed, just barely. The squirrel froze. He pressed again, more deliberately this time, claws curling around the metal edge. The lid shifted a fraction of a centimeter. The squirrel let go and dropped to the ground. Inside the house, the person frowned slightly. That was new. The next morning, sunflower seeds lay on the ground beneath the feeder. Not many, just a small scatter, like someone had shaken their hand once and stopped. The feeder still hung in place. The lid was closed. The clip looked unchanged. The birds arrived late, cautious. They fed quickly and left. The squirrel watched from the fence, unmoving. He didn't go for the seeds on the ground right away. He waited until the birds were gone. Then he climbed down, collected the fallen seeds calmly, one by one, and carried them to the base of the maple tree. He ate there, sitting upright, paws working methodically, eyes occasionally flicking back toward the feeder. By midday, more seeds had dropped. Still not many, still controlled. The squirrel returned in the afternoon and climbed straight to the feeder without hesitation. He didn't test the jump. He didn't pause to think. He grabbed the feeder, pressed the clip once, wrong angle, adjusted, pressed again, right angle, and the lid lifted just enough for gravity to do the rest. Seeds spilled, not all at once, just a thin stream, ticking against plastic and metal as they fell. The squirrel released the clip immediately and dropped away, landing lightly. The lid snapped shut again, the clip reseating itself as designed. The feeder looked intact. The seeds, however, lay scattered below. The person at the window stared. The squirrel descended, gathered what he wanted, and left. The next day, the birds arrived to find the feeder lighter than it should have been, and the ground beneath it telling a story none of them understood. Above them, the clip gleamed in the sun, unchanged. And in the maple tree, the squirrel sat very still, already deciding when to return, having learned that the seeds came faster when they dropped first. The second phase began without urgency, which was the most unsettling part. The feeder still hung in the same place. The clip still snapped shut with the same clean tension when tested by a human hand. To anyone glancing out the window, nothing looked broken. The birds returned cautiously, then normally. Sunflower seeds rattled softly inside the tube as beaks tapped plastic. But the squirrel had changed. He no longer rushed. He arrived later in the morning now, after the first feeding wave had passed and the birds had scattered back into the hedges. He sat on the fence rail, tail wrapped loosely around his feet, and watched. Not the birds, the feeder. He was waiting for quiet. When it came, he moved with efficiency that hadn't been there before. No missed jumps, no slips. He climbed the pole in one smooth sequence, paused briefly to adjust his grip, and pulled himself onto the feeder like it was a familiar object. He didn't touch the seed ports. He went straight to the clip. This time, he didn't experiment. His paw landed exactly where it needed to, pressing inward at a shallow angle. The lid lifted a fraction. Seeds spilled. He released immediately and dropped. It took less than 3 seconds. On the ground, the squirrel did not eat right away. He gathered seeds into small piles using quick, precise movements, pushing some under leaves, some into shallow depressions in the soil. Only after that did he sit back and eat a portion, calm and unhurried. Inside the house, the person at the window stopped smiling. They tightened the clip that afternoon, pinching it harder, making sure it seated fully. They shook the feeder gently to test it. Nothing moved. The next morning, seeds were on the ground again. Fewer this time, as if the squirrel had learned exactly how much pressure would produce just enough spill without risking a full opening. The feeder still looked untouched. The lid was closed. The clip still resisted human fingers. The squirrel arrived later that day and repeated the process, identical in timing and movement. Press, spill, drop, collect. What changed next was the birds. They noticed the pattern before the human did. Finches lingered on the feeder less. Chickadees darted in and out quickly, nervous. Sparrows avoided the ground entirely, sensing that something else now claimed it. The feeder, once a shared space, began to feel unstable. The squirrel never chased them away. He didn't need to. He waited until they left. By the end of the week, the routine was set. Birds fed early, the squirrel fed later, seeds dropped before being eaten. Gravity did the work first, the human tried moving the feeder. They hung it farther from the pole, switched to a thicker hook, even added a small weight to reduce swing. The squirrel adapted without drama. He adjusted his approach angle, climbed from a different point, and reached the clip just the same. The clip itself became shinier over time, worn smooth where his claws pressed it again and again. One afternoon, the human watched closely from behind the curtain. The squirrel climbed, pressed, released, and dropped away so cleanly it looked rehearsed. The lid snapped shut. No visible damage, no prolonged struggle. The human stepped outside immediately afterward and checked the feeder. The clip was firm, the lid was secure, the design had not failed. The squirrel had simply learned it. From that day on, the sunflower seeds always dropped first. Not because the feeder was broken, but because it had been understood. The third stage arrived when the humans stopped trying to fix the feeder and started trying to understand it. They stood at the window longer now, not with irritation, but with the slow curiosity that comes when a pattern refuses to break. The feeder still worked, birds still ate, nothing was damaged, and yet every afternoon a small constellation of sunflower seeds appeared on the ground below, precise and limited, as if rationed. The squirrel no longer came every day. That, more than anything, marked the shift. He skipped mornings. Sometimes he skipped entire days. When he did come, it was never hurried and never uncertain. He arrived when the feeder was fullest and the yard was quietest. He climbed, pressed, released, and left as if punching a time card. The seeds on the ground became part of the landscape. Ants found them. A mourning dove discovered them and returned daily. The soil beneath the feeder darkened slightly from repeated contact, the faint oil from crushed seed shells soaking in. The feeder above stayed lighter than it should have been. The birds adapted fully now. They fed quickly and left earlier. They avoided lingering. Some began pecking at the ground instead of the ports, taking advantage of what fell. The feeder's purpose inverted subtly. It was no longer the primary source of food, but the mechanism that distributed it. The squirrel watched this without interfering. He never chased ground-feeding birds. He never defended the fallen seeds aggressively. His role had narrowed to one precise action, at one precise point in the day. Press, release, gravity. One afternoon, rain came suddenly, heavy enough to drive birds into cover. The feeder swung empty in the wind, seeds rattling inside. The squirrel did not appear. That evening, the ground seeds softened and swelled. Some were lost to moisture, some sprouted days later, thin green shoots pushing up beneath the feeder. The squirrel appeared the next morning and ignored them. He went straight to the feeder, repeated the action, and left. The human finally changed one thing that mattered. They removed the feeder for a day. The hook remained empty. The birds circled, confused. The squirrel came down from the maple, climbed the pole, and stopped short when he reached the top. He sniffed the air, looked at the hook, and sat back on his haunches. He waited, not long, just long enough to confirm absence. Then he climbed down and left the yard entirely. When the feeder returned the next morning, same place, same clip, the squirrel arrived within the hour. He did not test it. He climbed and pressed immediately. Seeds dropped. The human felt something settle then, a realization that came without drama. The squirrel was not exploiting a weakness. He was maintaining a relationship. The feeder provided seeds. The squirrel converted access into timing. Birds, gravity, weather, everything else filled in around that decision. Late in the season, when leaves thinned and light sharpened, the squirrel's visits became rarer. The feeder stayed fuller longer. Birds lingered again. Seeds dropped less often. Then one morning, the squirrel pressed the clip and nothing fell. The feeder was nearly empty. He released, dropped, and climbed the pole again, testing once more. Still nothing. He sat on the railing and stared up at the tube, tail still, eyes unreadable. After a minute, he left. He did not return that day. The human refilled the feeder that evening. The squirrel came back the next afternoon and pressed the clip once. Seeds fell. He did not stay to collect them. He had already learned what he needed. As autumn deepened and the maple shed its last leaves, the pattern loosened, but did not disappear. Seeds dropped less predictably now, sometimes skipped for days, sometimes released in small bursts. The feeder remained intact. The clip never failed. But the yard had changed. The ground beneath the feeder was always watched now, not just by birds, but by expectation. Even when the squirrel was absent, the human found themselves glancing down first, checking for fallen seeds before looking up. The lesson had moved. It no longer belonged to the squirrel alone. The feeder still hung outside the window. Birds still came. The clip still clicked shut. But everyone involved, human, bird, squirrel, now understood the same quiet rule. Access didn't require force, only understanding where to press and when to let go.